Rain hammered against the cracked windshield of the taxi, drowning out the driver's curses as the engine sputtered for the last time. The headlights flickered and died, leaving the narrow Boston streets swallowed in darkness. Amelia Reed pressed a trembling hand to her swollen belly, gasping as another contraction tore through her body like a wave. She was only 8 months along. It was too soon. The driver shouted something about calling for help, but his voice was a blur behind the roar of the storm. Water streamed down the windows, and lightning split the night in blinding white veins. Amelia clutched her hospital bag, trying to breathe through the pain, whispering the rhythm they'd taught her in birthing class, in, out, in, out. But the fear kept rising, sharp and suffocating. Then, through the sheets of rain, a pair of headlights cut through the darkness. A sleek black Bentley rolled to a stop beside the broken taxi. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, an umbrella snapping open against the wind. He was tall, his coat clinging to broad shoulders, his movements controlled even as the rain lashed around him. He bent down beside her window, and for the briefest moment, lightning illuminated his face. Sharp jaw, storm-gray eyes, and the kind of calm authority that made people obey without question. "Are you hurt?" His voice was low, steady, and far too composed for the chaos around them. I'm fine," Amelia managed, her breath catching as another contraction gripped her. "I just need to get to St. Catherine's Hospital. The baby's coming early." The man didn't hesitate. He opened the taxi door, ignoring the driver's protests. "You can't stay here. My car's warm, and it's faster." His tone left no room for argument. "I don't even know you," she said, gripping the seat. He gave a faint, wry smile, rain dripping from his hair. "Then let's fix that." "Eth and Blackwell. Now come on, Miss Reed," she whispered, teeth clenched through the next wave of pain. "Miss Reed," he said, his voice softening, "you and your baby are getting out of this storm." Before she could argue, he lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, his coat wrapping around her like armor. The rain pelted them as he carried her to the Bentley, his shoes splashing through puddles that mirrored the lightning above. Inside, the warmth of leather and the faint scent of cedar wrapped around her as he laid her gently across the back seat. He slid behind the wheel, starting the engine with one hand while grabbing her trembling fingers with the other. "You'll be all right," he said quietly. "Just breathe. I've called ahead. The hospital's 10 minutes away." But 10 minutes stretched into forever. The rain turned the streets into rivers, and the car's tires hissed against the waterlogged asphalt. Amelia cried out as another contraction hit, stronger, closer together. Her voice broke. "It's too fast. Ethan, it's happening now." He glanced back, the mask of composure cracking for the first time. "Now? You mean?" Her scream answered for her. He pulled the car onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing red through the storm. Okay, Amelia. I've got you. You're a nurse. You know what to do." Her eyes were wild with pain. "Not in a car!" "Then I'll be your hands," he said, rolling up his sleeves with quiet determination. His voice became the anchor she clung to as he followed her instructions, fetching towels from the trunk, folding his coat beneath her head, guiding her through each breath. Minutes blurred into eternity, and then, one final push, one final cry, and the air filled with the sweetest, most fragile sound imaginable, a baby's first breath. Amelia sobbed with relief, clutching the tiny, wailing bundle Ethan placed in her arms. Her tears mingled with the rain that dripped from his hair as he leaned over her, breathless and shaking in the glow of the dashboard lights. "She's perfect," Amelia whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan reached out, brushing a curl from the baby's damp forehead. His eyes, so cold moments ago, softened into something she didn't recognize, something raw, protective, and almost reverent. "You're safe now," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I promise." Outside, thunder rolled across the city like an omen. Neither of them knew that this night, the night a stranger helped her bring life into the world, would bind their fates forever. The hospital lights were too bright for her tired eyes, and the world smelled like antiseptic and rain as Amelia lay in the recovery room with her newborn sleeping beside her. The storm had passed, but the memory of it still echoed in her chest like thunder. She barely remembered being lifted from the Bentley and hearing Ethan's voice steady and sure giving instructions to the emergency staff as if he did this kind of thing every day. When she woke hours later, he was gone, leaving only a single white rose and a glass of water on the bedside table and a note written in neat, bold handwriting that said, "Rest easy, you and your daughter are safe." It was signed only with his first name. 3 days later, Amelia stepped out of the hospital with a borrowed coat around her shoulders and her baby cradled against her chest. The sky was gray again and her old world had vanished. Her apartment had been broken into during the storm. The landlord had changed the locks and the few belongings she owned were gone. She had nowhere to go, no family nearby, and barely a few dollars in her purse. She walked aimlessly through the streets, her baby sleeping quietly, unaware that their future was unraveling before it even began. When she finally stopped, it was in front of a television store. Dozens of screens glowed behind the glass, showing the morning news. And there he was, Ethan Blackwell, the Emos, and from the Bentley. His face filled every screen as the anchor spoke his name with reverence and curiosity. Tech visionary, widower, philanthropist, reclusive billionaire. Amelia stared as if seeing a ghost. The man who had delivered her child was not just a stranger, he was one of the richest men in Boston. The thought made her chest tighten with confusion and something else she could not name. That night she rented a cheap room in a rundown motel on the edge of the city. The wallpaper peeled, the heater groaned, and every noise made her heart race. As she fed her daughter, she whispered promises that tomorrow would be better. But as she laid the baby down, she noticed an envelope slipped under the door. No address, no name, just her. Inside were hospital discharge papers already paid in full. Every fee, every cost covered by someone named Ethan Blackwell. For a long time, Amelia just stared at the letter, her pulse quick and uneven. Why would a man like him do that for someone like her? She told herself she would return the money, repay him somehow. But when she tried to call the number listed on the note, the line was disconnected. It was as if he had vanished back into the storm that had brought him to her. Still, she could not stop thinking about him, the way his voice had calmed her, the steadiness of his hands as he caught her child, the quiet strength in his eyes when he said, "You are safe now." 2 nights later, a knock came at her door. The sound made her freeze, her heart pounding. When she opened it, Ethan Blackwell stood in the dim hallway, his coat still damp from the drizzle outside, his gray eyes unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, clutching her baby closer. "I could say the same about you," he replied, his voice calm, but carrying an undercurrent of something darker, concern or maybe guilt. "You're not safe here, Amelia." She swallowed hard, unsure whether to trust him or run. "Safe," she echoed. "From what? From the people who are already looking for you," he said quietly. Then he handed her another envelope, heavier this time. Inside was a key card embossed with his company's emblem and an address written in his unmistakable handwriting. "Come to this place tomorrow," he said. "You and your daughter will have food, warmth, and protection. But you must trust me." "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because someone broke into your apartment for a reason," he said, "and because that night in the storm wasn't an accident." Before she could speak, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the misty street, leaving her holding the key that could change her life or destroy it completely. And as the rain began to fall again, Amelia realized her story with Ethan Blackwell was far from over. It was only just beginning. The address Ethan had given her led to a street that didn't seem to exist on any map. It was just past dawn when Amelia arrived, carrying her baby in her arms, wrapped tightly against the cold. Mist clung to the air and the world felt half awake, half dreaming. A tall iron gate waited at the end of a winding road, and beyond it rose an estate so vast it seemed to have grown out of the fog itself. The mansion was quiet, the kind of quiet that hummed with secrets. A guard opened the gate as soon as she approached, as if her arrival had been expected. Inside the grounds, roses climbed trellises despite the cold, and fountains stood frozen in the early morning frost. When the front door opened, Ethan stood there waiting in a charcoal sweater and dark slacks, looking far too composed for a man who had just invited a stranger into his private world. "You came," he said simply, his voice carrying something between relief and regret. "You gave me no choice," she replied softly. He nodded as though he understood and stepped aside, letting her enter. The house smelled of cedar and faint smoke from a distant fireplace. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of people with familiar features, the same gray eyes, the same proud jawline. She could feel their gaze following her as she walked through the vast marble foyer. A woman appeared at the top of the stairs wearing a cream shawl and a look of surprise. "Amelia." "This is my sister, Elena," Ethan said. "She manages most things around here." Elena descended the stairs gracefully, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "So this is her," she murmured, as if the words were meant only for herself, the woman from the storm. Amelia's grip on her baby tightened. There was kindness in Elena's voice, but also something sharp underneath it, something testing. Ethan guided Amelia through a long corridor and into a smaller room filled with soft light and warm tones, a contrast to the cold elegance of the rest of the house. A cradle sat near the window as if it had been waiting. "You'll stay here for now," Ethan said. "Everything you and your daughter need is ready. Food, clothes, formula, the staff has been instructed to assist you." Amelia turned to him, bewildered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." He hesitated just a moment before answering. "Maybe I don't know you, but I know what it feels like to have no one to turn to." The sincerity in his voice made her heart tighten. But even as he spoke, she caught something else in his eyes, a shadow that didn't belong to the present, but to some past grief still haunting him. Later that evening, as she rocked her baby to sleep, Amelia heard faint music echoing through the mansion. It wasn't from a speaker or a phone, it was a live piano somewhere below her, a melody that rose and fell like someone's heart laid bare. She followed the sound barefoot down the staircase, her curiosity stronger than caution. Ethan was in the music room, his fingers moving over the keys with a precision that seemed effortless until she saw the tremor in his hands. He stopped playing when he noticed her standing there. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said quietly. "You didn't," he replied. "This song belonged to my wife." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Amelia felt her chest tighten. "I didn't know you were married," she whispered. "I'm not anymore," he said, his gaze fixed on the piano. "She died last winter." He looked up then, and their eyes met. The silence that followed was different from before, filled not with distance, but with understanding. Two people marked by loss, recognizing the same emptiness in each other. Before she could speak, a sound shattered the stillness, the creak of a door opening somewhere down the hall, then a voice, low and unfamiliar, whispering Ethan's name. He frowned, stood, and crossed the room. The hall beyond was empty, yet the air seemed colder, darker. "You're not the only one in this house with ghosts," he said finally, his voice quiet. Amelia didn't ask what he meant. She already knew some houses kept memories like scars, and some men did too. As she followed him back toward the nursery, she couldn't shake the feeling that every shadow in that mansion had a story, and she had just stepped into one that would change everything she thought she knew about the stranger who had saved her life. The days that followed felt like a dream wrapped in unease. The mansion was beautiful, but it never truly slept. At night, Amelia would hear doors close softly somewhere upstairs, or footsteps that stopped the moment she turned her head. The wind moved through the hallways like whispers, and sometimes when she checked on her baby, she felt as if unseen eyes were watching from the dark corners of the nursery. Ethan was gone most days, buried in meetings and calls that took place behind locked office doors. When he did appear, his manner was polite but distracted. The only one who truly spoke to her was Elena, who drifted in and out of rooms like a ghost herself. She was charming in front of her brother, but when they were alone, the warmth vanished. She would study Amelia and the baby with an expression that never quite revealed what she was thinking. One afternoon, Amelia carried her daughter through the west wing and past a door she had never noticed before. It was steel gray, not oak like the others, and fitted with a digital lock. The sound of faint humming came from inside, a mechanical vibration like machines buried behind the wall. She leaned closer, curious, but Elena's voice snapped through the air, making her flinch. "That wing is off limits," she said sharply. "Storage and systems for the estate. You're not to go there." Amelia nodded quickly, but her heart thudded hard against her ribs. She had caught a glimpse of something through the small glass window before the lights inside flickered out. A shadow, human-shaped, moving. That night, Ethan returned early for the first time in weeks. The baby had fallen asleep in his arms, as if she recognized his touch. Amelia watched him with quiet fascination, the way his entire expression softened when he looked at the child. "She looks like her mother," he murmured absently, then froze as if realizing what he had said. He set the baby down carefully and turned away. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that." "You loved her very much," Amelia said gently. He stared at the rain tapping against the window, his voice low and hoarse. "She was everything, until the accident." Something in the way he said the word made the hair rise on the back of her neck. She wanted to ask more, but the pain in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she poured him a cup of tea from the pot. Mrs. Hart, the housekeeper, had left and handed it to him. He looked at her hands instead of the cup and whispered thank you, as if those simple words cost him strength he no longer had. Later, after he had gone to bed, Amelia wandered into the long hall where the family portraits hung. She lifted her candle and stopped in front of the largest painting near the staircase. The woman in it was breathtaking, pale skin, deep red hair, eyes the same G-ray as Ethan's. His late wife, Evelyn Blackwell. The signature in the corner was smeared, almost erased, as if someone had tried to remove it. A soft thud came from behind her. She spun around. The hallway was empty. Then she saw it on the floor at her feet, a small envelope yellowed with age that must have fallen from behind the frame. Her fingers shook as she picked it up. Inside was a folded piece of paper scrawled in hurried handwriting. "If something happens to me, look for the truth in the West Wing. They will tell you it's locked for safety. Don't believe them. E." Her pulse roared in her ears. The West Wing. The door Elena had warned her away from. She pressed the letter to her chest and whispered to the sleeping house, "I will find out what happened to you." Just then, a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. It was Ethan, half in shadow, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be up this late," he said quietly. The flicker of the candle made his eyes look like silver fire. "I couldn't sleep," she said quickly, hiding the paper in her pocket. He stepped closer, his voice soft but filled with something that made her breath catch. "Neither can I. Sometimes the memories won't let me." For a long moment they stood there in silence, two broken souls caught between guilt and longing. Then from somewhere deep in the mansion, a door slammed with such force that the candle flame went out, plunging them into darkness. Ethan took her hand without hesitation. "Stay close," he said, his voice low. "You're not the only one awake in this house tonight." And as he led her through the shadows, Amelia realized the mansion wasn't haunted by ghosts from the past. It was haunted by secrets that refused to stay buried. Morning came with a calm that felt wrong, like the air before lightning. The mansion looked almost peaceful, sunlight spilling across the marble floors, but the silence carried weight. Amelia tried to focus on the baby's laughter, on the small, ordinary sounds of breakfast, but her thoughts kept circling back to the letter she had found behind the portrait. The words burned in her mind, "Look for the truth in the West Wing." She waited until Ethan left for a meeting and Elena was busy with the staff before she made her move. Her heart hammered as she carried her daughter upstairs and placed her gently in the crib, then slipped down the hall toward the forbidden door. The keypad glowed, faintly waiting. She didn't know any codes, but she remembered how Ethan typed a 6-digit number to unlock his office. His birthday, maybe. She tried it. Nothing. Then she remembered the portrait and the faint date painted under Evelyn's name. The keypad clicked and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside was nothing like she expected. No storage, no machinery. The room was small and stark, filled with humming computer servers and shelves of documents. And on one desk, under a single lamp, sat a glass box containing a silver pendant engraved with the initials E.B., Evelyn Blackwell. Next to it lay a file marked Accident Report. Amelia opened it, her breath catching as she read the details. There was nothing accidental about it. The car had been tampered with, brakes disabled hours before Evelyn drove it off the coastal road. The report had been signed off by a private investigator hired by Ethan himself. She was still reading when she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, the file still in her hands. Elena stood in the doorway, her face pale, eyes cold. "You shouldn't have come here," she said quietly. Her voice held no surprise, only resignation. "You knew," Amelia whispered. "You knew what happened to her." Elena's smile was brittle. "Of course I did, but you don't understand what kind of man my brother really is." "That's not true," Amelia said, though doubt coiled in her stomach. "He saved my life." Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He saves what he breaks. He always has." Before Amelia could answer, the door slammed shut behind her, sealing them both inside. Elena moved closer, her tone almost pitying. "Leave while you still can." The last woman who tried to uncover his secrets didn't live long enough to regret it. The sound of a key turning echoed through the hall outside. Ethan's voice followed, sharp and commanding. "Elena, enough." He pushed the door open, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing in here, Amelia?" Amelia's voice shook. "I wanted the truth. About Evelyn. About you." He looked at the open file on the desk, and something in his face shifted from shock to something like sorrow. "That report was supposed to be destroyed," he said quietly. "Did you kill her?" she demanded. "No." His answer came fast, raw. "But someone wanted it to look that way. Someone inside this house." Elena laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Always the hero, brother, always the victim." Ethan turned to her, his eyes dark with fury. "You betrayed us before once wasn't enough." The tension snapped like a wire. Elena backed toward the door, but before she could reach it, Ethan stepped between them. "You are never to come near her or the child again," he said. "Leave the house, now." Elena hesitated, then gave Amelia one last look, a strange mix of warning and sympathy, before disappearing down the corridor. Ethan closed the door and turned to Amelia, his voice low and hoarse. "You were never supposed to see any of this." "Then tell me the truth," she said. "Please." He sank into the chair beside the desk, the weight of something invisible pressing his shoulders down. "Evelyn was pregnant," he said quietly. "We fought that night. She wanted to leave the company, take her shares, sell everything. Someone used that argument to destroy both of us. Her car was sabotaged to make it look like suicide, and I was blamed." He looked up, then eyes bright with unshed tears. "You think I'm capable of that?" Amelia's breath caught. "No," she whispered, "but someone does." A soft cry drifted through the halls, the baby's cry, sharp and insistent. Amelia turned to run, but Ethan caught her wrist gently. "Whoever did this is still watching us," he said. "Promise me you won't leave the house tonight." She nodded, her pulse racing as she hurried back to the nursery. The baby had fallen quiet again, but the window was open, curtains fluttering in the cold wind. On the sill lay a single white rose, wet with dew, and a note pinned beneath it, written in elegant cursive. "The truth always comes back." Amelia pressed the note to her chest and felt the world tilt again. The storm that had brought her here had never really ended. It was just changing shape, and this time she wasn't sure anyone would survive it. Night fell heavy over the mansion, wrapping every hallway in uneasy silence. Amelia sat awake beside the crib, her mind replaying every word Ethan had said, every warning, every shadow of doubt that refused to fade. The white rose still lay on the nightstand, glistening faintly in the lamplight like a secret waiting to bloom. She wanted to believe Ethan's version of the truth, but her instincts whispered that the storm was only beginning. Downstairs, the faint hum of voices drifted through the floorboards. She recognized Ethan's voice, calm but strained, and another one lower, colder, unfamiliar. She pressed her ear to the vent and listened. The man was saying that the press was circling again, that questions about Evelyn's death had been revived by an anonymous leak. Ethan swore softly under his breath. "We bury it," he said. "I won't let them destroy my family again." The word family echoed through her chest like a bell. Did he mean her and the baby too, or was she just another obligation, another person to protect because guilt wouldn't let him do otherwise? When she finally dared to look out her window, the long driveway below was lit by the glow of headlights. A dark sedan idled at the gate, and she caught the glint of a camera lens. Someone was watching the house. She felt exposed, a fragile secret in a world of powerful men and hidden motives. The next morning she found Ethan in the library. His tie loosened his eyes, shadowed by lack of sleep. He didn't look like the confident billionaire she had first met. He looked hunted. "They're reopening the inquest into Evelyn's death," he said. "Someone sent the police the same file you found in the West Wing." She froze. "But that means they'll think I did it, that I broke in." He stepped closer, his voice low. "I'll protect you. I always will." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. She wanted to trust him, but the walls around him were made of secrets too thick to see through. When he left for another meeting, she began searching the library, desperate for answers of her own. Behind the third shelf, she found a hidden compartment with folders labeled with initials she didn't recognize. Inside were photographs of Evelyn at charity events, at the hospital, even in the gardens, smiling beside a man who was not Ethan. Her pulse quickened. The man in the photos was Richard Vale, Ethan's business partner, the same man she had heard in the study last night. One picture was dated only 2 weeks before Evelyn's death, and the two of them were holding hands. The door creaked. Amelia stuffed the photos into her pocket and turned to find Mrs. Hart, the housekeeper, standing in the doorway, her eyes flickering between fear and loyalty. "You shouldn't be digging into the past," she whispered. "Not if you want to stay safe." "What really happened to Evelyn?" Amelia asked. Mrs. Hart hesitated, then crossed herself as if warding off something terrible. "Evelyn found out things about the company, things she shouldn't have known. She was going to expose it all. Then she was gone." The room seemed to close in around them. Amelia wanted to run to Ethan, tell him everything, but a voice in her head stopped her. What if he already knew? That evening, the mansion came alive with tension. The news had broken onlo, and the story of Ethan Blackwell, the widower, under investigation again. Photographers gathered outside the gates, shouting questions. From the nursery window, Amelia watched the chaos while Ethan stood in the courtyard, answering none of them, his jaw hard, his coat snapping in the wind. He looked powerful again, but lonely in a way that made her heart ache. When he came inside, their eyes met across the hall. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he crossed to her, his voice soft and tired. "Whatever happens, remember, this isn't your fault." She searched his face. "What aren't you telling me, Ethan?" He touched her cheek gently, his fingers trembling. "There are people who will do anything to protect the truth about Evelyn. People who think I'm the only one standing in their way. And now they think you are too." A crash cut through his words. Glass shattered somewhere near the entryway. The baby started crying and they both turned. Smoke curled from under the main doors. Someone had thrown a flare through the window, lighting the floor in crimson glow. Ethan grabbed her arm. "Take the baby," he said. "Through the servants' tunnel behind the kitchen. Go now." She hesitated. "What about you?" He looked back toward the smoke and the growing noise of footsteps outside. "I'll stop them." Amelia ran clutching her child, the air filling with heat and panic. Behind her she heard Ethan shouting orders and then the crack of something breaking. She reached the tunnel door and turned back for one last look. Through the haze she saw him standing against the light framed by fire and chaos, his face calm and determined, like a man who had already made peace with whatever came next. As the tunnel swallowed her into darkness, she realized she didn't even know if she was running from the people outside, or from the truth waiting inside that house. Either way, the storm that had started the night she gave Bert, H in his car, had come for both of them again. And this time, there would be no safe promises, whispered in the rain. Smoke hung over the estate like a wounded ghost. The fire had been contained before it reached the main house, but the damage was done. Reporters called it an act of protest, some said revenge, others whispered cover-up. Amelia didn't care about any of that. She only knew that Ethan hadn't come back when the smoke cleared. The police found no trace of him inside the mansion or on the grounds. His phone was left behind his car keys, too. It was as if he had vanished into the night. Days passed with no word. The authorities called it voluntary disappearance. Elena called it guilt. Amelia called it impossible. She stayed in the guest house with her baby, refusing to leave until she had answers. Every night she walked the halls with a flashlight searching for clues while Mrs. Hart begged her to stop. The mansion creaked and whispered around her like something alive and waiting. Then one evening she found a note slipped beneath her door, written in Ethan's precise handwriting. Trust no one, not even her. The truth is buried under Evelyn's name. Find the lock beneath the rose window. The message was unsigned, but she knew the way he looped the E. She had seen it before. Her heart raced. If he was alive, he was trying to tell her something. She waited until midnight, then went to the great hall where the rose window cast faint patterns of moonlight across the floor. She searched the stone panels beneath it until her fingers brushed against a hidden latch. A small compartment opened, revealing a metal box sealed with a fingerprint lock. She pressed her thumb against it on impulse, and to her shock, it clicked open. Inside was a hard drive and a folder marked Project Aurora. The name meant nothing, but the documents inside made her skin crawl. They described medical trials under the Blackwell Foundation, experimental treatments testing on pregnant women to develop something called genetic resilience therapy. Ethan's signature was on the funding pages, but not on the approvals. Those belonged to Richard Vale. Her hands shook as she flipped through photos and reports until one page stopped her cold. A list of volunteers' names redacted, except one. Evelyn Blackwell. Next to it a note in Ethan's handwriting, do not continue. Risk too high. She had been part of the experiment, the one that had killed her child and possibly her. Amelia backed away from the desk, her mind spinning. No wonder Ethan had been hunted. No wonder he had disappeared. He had discovered what his own company was hiding. The door creaked. She spun around, clutching the folder to her chest. Elena stood in the doorway, her face pale in the half-light. I warned you, she said softly. He's gone because of this. You should have left when you had the chance. What is Project Aurora? Amelia demanded. Elena hesitated, her eyes glistening with something that looked like regret. It was supposed to be a miracle, she whispered. A cure for birth defects, a way to create stronger children. But it wasn't ready. Evelyn volunteered against Ethan's wishes. When it went wrong, she blamed him. So did the investors. They needed a scapegoat. And Richard Vale? She asked. He took control of the company after Evelyn's death, Elena said. He wanted to bury the project and anyone tied to it. He made sure Ethan took the fall. Before Amelia could speak, the power cut out, plunging the room into darkness. A red beam of light flickered across the wall, a laser scope from a rifle. Amelia dropped to the floor, clutching the baby as a bullet shattered the window above her. Elena screamed and ducked behind the desk. Another shot cracked the air. Get out, Elena shouted. The servants' tunnel, go. They're not after me. They're after you. Amelia ran, the baby's cries echoing off the stone walls. She heard footsteps behind her, heavy and fast, but she didn't look back. She burst into the night rain, hitting her face like needles. Headlights flared ahead, blinding her. A car screeched to a stop and the door flew open. Get in. Ethan's voice commanded through the downpour. She froze, disbelief flooding her chest. He was alive, bruised blood on his collar, but alive. He pulled her into the car, slammed the door, and gunned the engine. The mansion receded into the darkness behind them just as another explosion lit the night sky. Ethan drove in silence, the wipers struggling against the storm. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. I didn't want you to find that file. Then why did you leave the note? She asked, trembling. Because if I didn't, they would have killed you before you did, he said. Vale isn't just covering up a scandal. He's continuing Evelyn's work, using my company. She stared at him, heart pounding. And now what do? We end it, he said, eyes fixed on the road. We expose everything. But you need to be ready, Amelia. The moment we do this, every powerful man connected to Project Aurora will come for us. She looked down at her sleeping baby and then back at him. I've been running since the night she was born, she said. I'm done running. Ethan's mouth tightened into a grim smile. Then hold on, he said. The car sped into the storm, their reflection flashing briefly in the rearview mirror. Two broken souls bound by truth, love, and a secret that could destroy them both. The rain chased them down the coast like a living thing. Ethan's car cut through the storm toward the only place he said they would be safe, an abandoned lighthouse he owned miles away from the city. When they finally reached it, the ocean wind roared around them and the waves slammed against the cliffs below. Inside, the lighthouse smelled of salt and rust, but it was dry and hidden from the world. Amelia wrapped her baby in a blanket and watched as Ethan locked the heavy doors behind them, bolting every latch. He looked different now, stripped of the billionaire calm that once made him untouchable. His hair was damp, his shirt stained with blood from a shallow cut on his arm, and his eyes carried the weight of every secret he had buried. She wanted to ask if he was hurt, but the words caught in her throat. He leaned against the wall, catching his breath before finally saying, We have less than 12 hours before they find us. Who are they? Amelia asked. He gave a tired laugh. The people who built everything I once thought I owned. The board, the investors, the same men who funded Project Aurora. Richard Vale just made it worse. He promised them results, and now he's using Evelyn's research to keep their support. Amelia held her baby tighter. You mean he's still experimenting? Ethan nodded. And he's using women like you. Her stomach turned cold. Like me. He looked at her then, and she saw the guilt written across his face. The night of the storm wasn't an accident, he said. They knew you were pregnant. They wanted to test your blood for genetic markers connected to Evelyn's research. You were supposed to be intercepted before you reached the hospital. The taxi breaking down, the men following you, all of it was planned. I didn't know until after I found you. The world seemed to tilt. You knew, and you didn't tell me, she whispered. If I had told you, they would have killed you, he said. Saving you was the only way to stop them from getting what they wanted. Before she could reply, headlights flared outside, cutting through the rain. Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the staircase. They found us, he said. They raced up the narrow stairs to the top of the lighthouse, the baby clutched to Amelia's chest. Through the shattered glass dome, she could see two black SUVs parked at the edge of the cliffs, figures moving in the rain. One of them raised a megaphone. Ethan Blackwell, come out or we burn it all down. Ethan's jaw clenched. Vale. Amelia looked down at the baby sleeping despite the chaos and whispered, we can't fight them. He stepped closer, his voice calm but fierce. We can outsmart them. There's a generator in the basement and a satellite link. If we send the files from the drive to the press, they'll have no reason to keep us alive. He handed her the hard drive wrapped in a waterproof case. Keep this safe. If anything happens to me, you run to the dock and take the boat. No, she said, shaking her head. I'm not leaving you. He smiled faintly and brushed his thumb over her cheek. You and your daughter are the only good things I've ever done. That's why I have to finish this. Before she could answer, a gunshot shattered the window above them. Glass rained across the floor. Ethan pulled her down, covering her with his body as bullets tore through the walls. The baby started crying, a thin, desperate sound that cut through the storm. Ethan dragged them toward the stairs, shouting over the thunder, "Go now! Down the stairs! The boat's at the cove!" She stumbled down the spiral steps, clutching the child to her chest. Behind her another gunshot echoed, and Ethan's voice roared in pain. She turned, but he shouted again, "Run!" Tears blurred her vision as she reached the bottom. She could hear footsteps above, men yelling Ethan's name. She sprinted into the rain, heading for the path that led to the water. The wind clawed at her dress, and the sea roared beneath the cliffs. At the dock, the small motorboat rocked wildly. She placed the baby inside, wrapped in blankets, then turned back toward the lighthouse. Through the storm, she could see movement in the tower, flashes of light and the faint glow of fire spreading. Then a figure stumbled out onto the balcony, framed by the blaze. Ethan. His silhouette was outlined against the flames, one hand clutching the railing, the other raised in defiance. She heard his voice, carried faintly by the wind. For Evelyn. For the truth. For her. A single shot rang out. His body jerked backward, then disappeared into the fire. Amelia screamed, but the storm swallowed the sound. She stood frozen until the structure collapsed in a shower of sparks and smoke. Then she climbed into the boat and pulled the engine cord. The boat surged forward, cutting through the waves. Behind her, the lighthouse burned like a beacon of everything she had lost. Ahead of her lay only darkness and the open sea. She looked down at her baby sleeping again through the storm and whispered, "I'll finish what he started. I'll make them pay." And for the first time since the night she met Ethan Blackwell, her fear turned into something else entirely. Determination sharper than grief. She wasn't running anymore. She was going to bring the truth into the light no matter what it cost her. The ocean carried her through the night like a whisper of fate. Amelia steered the boat toward the faint outline of the city lights on the horizon, the baby tucked safely beside her, wrapped in Ethan's coat. Every wave that crashed against the hull sounded like a heartbeat, the echo of everything she had left behind. When dawn finally broke, the lighthouse was only a memory, a column of smoke fading into the gray sky. She reached the harbor before sunrise and slipped through the docks unnoticed. Her phone was dead, her clothes soaked, and her heart a tangle of grief and fury. She needed a plan, but more than that, she needed proof. Ethan's sacrifice would mean nothing if the world never knew what Richard Vale and his investors had done. She opened the waterproof case and pulled out the hard drive. It was intact, the only remaining piece of Ethan Blackwell's truth. She found refuge in a small apartment above a bakery in the old quarter, the kind of place where no one asked questions as long as you paid in cash. The old woman who owned it helped her dry her clothes and made her tea without a word. When the baby woke, crying, Amelia whispered, "You're safe now," but the words felt hollow. She had promised Ethan she would finish this toi, but she had no idea where to begin. That night, while she tried to feed her daughter, the television flickered with breaking news. Ethan Blackwell presumed dead in Lighthouse Fire Police investigating foul play. The image on screen showed the smoldering ruins and a stretcher carrying what they claimed was his body. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe he could have survived, but the rational part of her knew the truth. The world had buried him already. Then the broadcast changed, showing Richard Vale addressing reporters outside the Blackwell Tower. His voice smooth, his expression solemn. "Ethan's death is a tragedy," he said. "The Blackwell legacy will continue through responsible leadership. Project Aurora is being shut down permanently." Amelia felt rage flood her chest. He was lying smiling while the man who died exposing his crimes was being mourned as the villain. That was when she decided grief could wait. Revenge could not. She searched through the files on the drive until she found encrypted documents marked confidential. Each one revealed a layer of the operation Vale had continued in secret private hospitals overseas, children born through experimental procedures, women paid to disappear after complications. But she couldn't open the files without a password. She tried Ethan's name, Evelyn's birth date, even the baby's, but nothing worked. The next day, as she walked through the city, she noticed men in dark suits near every corner. One was pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes kept following her reflection in the glass. Another lingered near the bakery door, too long to be coincidence. She hurried back upstairs, her pulse racing. Inside her apartment, a letter was waiting on the table, though she knew she had locked the door. The envelope was sealed with wax bearing the Blackwell family crest. Inside was a single line written in Ethan's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I'm still alive." Her knees gave out. The room spun around her. Could it be real? She read it again, his handwriting certain, his phrasing unmistakable. At the bottom was an address and 3 words. "Bring the child. Alone." Every instinct screamed it could be a trap, but hope was stronger than fear. That night she left the apartment, taking only the baby and the hard drive. The address led her to a derelict warehouse on the river's edge, its windows shattered, its walls covered in graffiti. The wind howled through the structure like a warning. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The lights flickered once, then went out completely. A single spotlight snapped on, illuminating a figure standing at the far end of the room. Ethan. Alive. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, but his eyes burned with life. Amelia ran to him, tears spilling down her face, but he stopped her with a shake of his head. "Not yet," he said quietly. "We're not safe. Vale thinks I'm dead, and that gives us one advantage. But we have to move fast." He opened his hand, revealing a small flash drive identical to the one she carried. "They're twins," he said. "Yours is the bait. Mine is the proof." Before she could respond, a sound echoed through the warehouse, the creak of metal boots on concrete. Ethan's expression hardened. He handed her the baby and whispered, "Go now through the back exit. I'll hold them off." "No," she said, gripping his arm. "I'm not losing you again." He smiled, a broken kind of smile. "You won't. Not this time. But you have to trust me. Find the journalist named Claire Monroe at the Boston Herald. She knows what to do." The door exploded open behind them, men in tactical gear storming in, shouting orders. Ethan turned toward them as she ran for the back, clutching the child and the drive to her chest. She could hear gunfire echoing through the warehouse, but she didn't look back, not even when she heard his voice. "Oh, the last time. Run, Amelia. Run for both of us." She burst into the cold night rain, her breath burning her throat. Behind her, the warehouse went up in flames, a second inferno consuming the past. And in that moment, she understood what Ethan had meant. The world wouldn't change because of his death. It would change because she survived to tell the truth. She tightened her hold on the baby and kept running through the storm toward the faint promise of dawn. The city was still asleep when Amelia reached the edge of downtown. Rain soaked her hair and the streets glistened like mirrors, reflecting the flashing red lights of distant sirens. Her baby stirred in her arms, murmuring softly against her chest. She stopped beneath a bridge to catch her breath, heart-pounding ears ringing from the echo of gunfire that still haunted her. Ethan was alive and he had sent her running, but she couldn't accept that she had left him again. She looked at the flash drive glinting faintly in her hand and knew it was more than just evidence. It was Ethan's last hope. If she failed to use it, everything he had sacrificed would be for nothing. The address he had given her echoed in her mind the name Claire Monroe, a journalist fearless enough to expose anyone. Amelia had seen her stories before about government corruption and pharmaceutical fraud. If anyone could bring Vale down, it was her. She reached the Herald building just as the morning edition trucks began to roll out. The guard tried to stop her, but the look in her eyes made him step aside. She walked straight to the elevator, dripping water on the polished floor, her baby wrapped tightly against her. When the doors opened, Claire Monroe was already there, a tall woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You must be Amelia Reed," Claire said before she could speak. "Ethan told me you might come." "Told you?" Amelia repeated, her voice shaking. "You've spoken to him." "He made it out, Claus." Iyer hesitated long enough for the answer to hit her. "He made it out long enough to send me the files," she said quietly. "The world doesn't know it yet, but we have everything we need." Claire led her into a small office filled with old newspapers and computer screens. On one of them, a file was already open, lines of data scrolling across the screen faster than Amelia could read. It detailed experiments carried out under the name Project Aurora. Genetic manipulation, human trials, black market adoptions, names of donors, politicians, and doctors who had profited from it, and at the center of it all, Richard Vale. "If we publish this, it will destroy half the board of directors in this city," Claire said. "But it will also make you a target. Are you ready for that, Amelia?" Amelia looked down at her baby, who had fallen asleep despite the noise. "I'm already a target," she said. "But my daughter deserves a world that isn't built on monsters like him. Publish it." Claire nodded and began typing her final report. As the words appeared on the screen, Amelia felt the weight of everything she had endured begin to lift. Hours later, the first notification hit the news feeds. Breaking story: Blackwell Corporation and Vale Industries linked to illegal human experimentation. Within minutes, it was everywhere. By afternoon, the world had turned upside down. Police raided corporate offices. Warrants were issued for Richard Vale and his partners. Television networks replayed footage of Amelia leaving the hospital with Ethan months ago, her face half hidden by shadows, now identified as the whistleblower mother at the center of the storm. But peace never came easy. That night, as she tried to rest in Claire's office, the building went dark. A voice came through the darkness, smooth and venomous. "Brave of you to challenge me, Miss Reed." Richard Vale stepped into the light holding a gun. His suit was immaculate, his smile colder than marble. "You should have stayed quiet." Amelia didn't move. The baby slept in a makeshift crib beside her. "You killed Ethan," she said. He shrugged slightly. "Collateral damage. Genius comes with a price." The elevator doors behind him opened with a soft chime. He turned just as a figure stepped out of the shadows. Ethan. His face was bruised, his arm bandaged, but his eyes burned with fire. "Not enough of a price," he said, his voice low and steady. Vale spun around, raising the gun, but Ethan moved faster. The shot rang out, a flash of light, and then silence. When Amelia opened her eyes, Vale was on the ground and Ethan stood breathing hard, the gun smoking in his hand. "It's over," he said, but she could see in his eyes that nothing would ever erase what they had endured. Police sirens wailed in the distance as Claire rushed in, calling for paramedics. Ethan turned to Amelia, and for the first time since the storm that had brought them together, she saw peace in his expression. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "So did you." He replied, "You survived." Weeks later, the world had changed. Vale's empire had collapsed. His investors fled the country. The government seized every asset tied to Project Aurora. Newspapers called Amelia the woman who brought down billionaires. But she cared only for the quiet moments, the mornings when her daughter laughed as sunlight poured through their new apartment window and Ethan brewed coffee in the kitchen. He walked toward her one morning carrying the baby in his arms, his once cold eyes soft, now filled with something that looked like forever. "We could start over," he said. "No secrets, no shadows." She smiled, a tired, beautiful smile. "We already have." They stood on the balcony watching the city rebuild itself piece by piece as if the world too had decided to heal. Down below, a headline flashed on a passing news screen. "Ethan Blackwell and Amelia Reed launch foundation for victims of corporate crimes." He turned to her, his voice quiet but certain. "You and I were strangers once, but now we've built something no storm can ever destroy." Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder. "Maybe every storm has its reason," she said softly. And somewhere deep in the rhythm of the city, the sound of rain began again. Not as a warning, but as a memory of the night love was born in a stranger's car and turned into the miracle that changed everything forever.